2 minutes, the slide should be removed from 100% ethanol and allowed to dry completely. So IQ hybridization, we need to have the hybridization buffer, the probe, and a 1.5 mil tube. After allowing both the buffer and the probe to thaw completely at room temperature for approximately 15 minutes, we want to mix both prior to application. For the IQ buffer, we're going to vortex it at maximum speed for 15 seconds, and then quickly spin down the sample to collect it into the bottom of the tube. Similarly, the probe, we're going to vortex for about 5 seconds, and again, spin it down to collect the sample. We're then going to transfer 9 microliters of the IQ fish hybridization buffer to the 1.5 mil tube. And then we're going to add 1 microliter of the probe to the IQ buffer in the 1.5 mil tube. Once the probe is mixed with the IQ buffer, we're going to vortex the sample and then spin it down briefly. The probe is now ready to be applied to the blood or bone marrow sample. Once the slide has been completely dried, 10 microliters of the probe IQ buffer mix can be applied to the sample. Cover slip should be added, and the probe mixture should spread out underneath the cover slip, covering the sample area completely. We then want to seal the cover slip using the cover slip sealant supplied in the Dako histology kit. We're going to place the slide into the Dako hybridizer and run a program allowing for denaturation for 5 minutes at 90 degrees C, followed by hybridization at 45 degrees C for 75 to 90 minutes. Following the hybridization to the blood and bone marrow sample, we're going to do a wash to remove the unbound probe. For this, we need the 1 extrinsic buffer heated to 63 degrees in a water bath. And we also need water heated to 37 degrees in a water bath. Finally, we need the 1 extrinsic buffer at room temperature. We're going to remove the slide from the Dako hybridizer and remove the cover slip sealant and cover slip. We're then going to place the slide into the stringency buffer at room temperature. We're then going to transfer the slide to the 63 degree stringency buffer wash. The slide is going to incubate in the 63 degree wash for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes of washing, we're going to transfer the slide to the water wash that's at 37 degrees. After the slide has incubated for 10 minutes in the 63 degree wash, we're going to move it to a 37 degree water wash and agitate for 10 seconds up and down. The slide is going to incubate in 37 degree water wash for 1 minute. Following the 1 minute water wash, we're going to remove the slide and allow it to dry completely. Once the slide is dried, we're going to apply 10 microliters of the fluorescence mounting medium to the slide. And then cover it with a cover slip. The slide is now ready to be visualized on a fluorescence microscope. So now we're ready to visualize our hybridized sample. To do this, we need a fluorescent microscope fitted with either a mercury lamp or an external light source. In either case, it's important to have the correct filters for visualizing your probes, and this will depend on the chromophores that are incorporated into the probe. In this case, we have a FITSI green chromophore, so we're going to use a filter that's optimized for this dye. And we also have a side 3 chromophore, so we're going to again use a filter that's optimized to detect the side 3 dye. It's also important to have the correct magnification for doing the analysis. We can recommend either a 60x or 100x objective. This will allow for the optimal resolution for visualizing the fluorescent foci produced by the hybridization. Visualization concludes the SureFish workflow.
Prior to processing your samples, the most important thing is to ensure you're utilizing a high-quality genomic DNA sample. Additionally, you want to take necessary measures of that sample to ensure the appropriate concentrations are achieved prior to starting the fragmentation reaction. To do this, we recommend performing serial dilutions of your genomic DNA sample to reach the appropriate concentration. Once the appropriate concentration of your genomic DNA samples has been obtained, you can then proceed to actually set up the fragmentation reaction. The fragmentation reaction requires three different components. You have a buffer, an enzyme mix, and then, of course, your genomic DNA samples. In addition, there is a stop solution that needs to be prepared in advance by adding an appropriate volume of 70% ethanol. So the first step in performing this fragmentation workflow is to thoroughly mix the enzyme and the buffer that's utilized on a vortex mixer and then spin down and place back on ice. Once the enzyme is thoroughly mixed, you can quickly spin it and then place it back in the ice bucket, and the same for the buffer. Once the fragmentation buffer and enzyme mix are thoroughly vortexed and spun down, we can now begin to combine the reagents together. The ratio of genomic DNA to enzyme mix is critical to achieve the appropriate fragmentation size required for the workflow that you're using. If you're following our whole genome library prep workflow, that ratio may be different than the ratio required for the target enrichment workflow. I would encourage you to refer to the appropriate protocol to reference the right ratio to use based on the workflow you're following. Once the sample buffer and enzyme mix are thoroughly vortexed and spun down, we can now assemble the fragmentation reaction. There is a particular order you need to follow when preparing the fragmentation mix. You do not want to make a master mix in advance, so I encourage you to follow the steps in the protocol to ensure the right reagent is added at the appropriate time. In this particular example, I'm going to be preparing 2 genomic DNA samples for the fragmentation reaction. The first thing that we're going to do is aliquot the appropriate volume of the QXT fragmentation buffer. To do this, we're going to utilize our P20 pipette, and then again transfer the appropriate volumes into the wells, and in this particular case, we're utilizing a 96 well plate. When pipetting and transferring these buffers and enzyme mixes, take particular care in how you transfer them because they are viscous. So pipette up and down slowly when you're transferring from the tube, and then again into the well of the 96 well plate. Now, once we've transferred our buffer, the next reagent to add is actually the DNA sample that's been diluted to the appropriate concentration. Again, because you want to make sure that you're pipetting your samples accurately, make sure you choose the right pipette for the volume that you're going to be transferring. In this particular example, I'll be transferring 2 microliters of our diluted genomic DNA samples. So we transferred 1 sample, now we'll transfer the second sample. And when I transfer these, I will mix them up and down by pipetting a couple of times just to make sure that the buffer and the sample are mixed thoroughly. I also want to check my pipette tip after I'm transferring my buffer and my samples into the appropriate wells to make sure I'm not pulling out any material on the tips of my pipettes. This can potentially impact the ratio of sample to enzyme and alter the fragmentation profile that you're supposed to achieve if everything is run according to the protocol. So now that the sample buffer and DNA are in the wells, the last component to add is going to be the enzyme mix. As mentioned previously, you want to make sure that that enzyme mix is thoroughly vortexed and spun down and kept on ice at all times right until you're ready to use it. So now what I'll do is I will transfer the appropriate amount of enzyme mix into each of the genomic DNA samples and pipette them up and down 8 to 10 times to make sure it's mixed thoroughly. Again, this is a very viscous solution, so please make sure when you pipette this, you pipette very carefully. Make sure nothing's carried over. Now that we've added the enzyme mix, we have a complete fragmentation reaction ready to go. We've added our QXT sample buffer, our genomic DNA samples, and then lastly the enzyme mix in that particular order. Again, it's important to avoid making a master mix in advance and instead add each component individually to each well with each sample to avoid any issues with the fragmentation reaction. Now that the 3 components have been combined together to create our fragmentation mix, which includes the QXT buffer, your genomic DNA sample, and the enzyme mix, the next step is to seal the plate and vortex it thoroughly for the appropriate amount of time indicated in the protocol. The next step will be to prepare the PCR instrument for the fragmentation reaction. To do this, refer to your protocol and input the cycling guidelines indicated. After those cycling parameters have been input, set up the PCR instrument and allow the block to achieve the appropriate temperature required before you transfer the plate onto the block to ensure an optimal fragmentation profile is achieved for each sample that you're processing. Now, at the completion of the fragmentation reaction, which also happens to add the adapters to each genomic DNA sample, you're going to want to wait for the PCR machine to stabilize at the 40-degree hold step for at least 1 minute before you transfer the samples back over to your ice bucket. So here, our samples have completed running. I'm going to open them and then transfer the plate immediately over to our ice bucket. Once the fragmentation reaction is complete, we've now transferred the plate from the PCR instrument back over to our ice bucket, and the next step is going to be to promptly remove the caps and then add in the appropriate volume of the QXT stop solution that's been made in advance with fresh 70% ethanol. So again, you want to carefully remove your tops from your plate to avoid any kind of spattering. Get your pipette, and then transfer the appropriate volume of the stop solution into each well that has a sample. You're going to want to mix this by pipetting up and down. And then again, just make sure you're not transferring or losing any liquid out of the tubes after you've mixed the sample. And what this is going to do is it's going to prevent the fragmentation reaction from going longer than it should, which can alter the profile of the sample. Once the QXT stop solution has been added and thoroughly mixed to each sample, the next step of the protocol is to perform an ampere purification. It's important to follow the guidelines in the QXT protocol when performing the ampere purification, as it can be performed in a 96-well format or using 1.5 mil tubes with a larger scale magnet. After you've completed the ampere purification of your samples, the next step in the workflow is to perform the PCR amplification step. This step may vary depending on whether you're preparing a sample for whole genome sequencing or a sample for target enrichment. So be careful to follow the appropriate steps in the correct protocol for this step of the workflow. When it comes time to perform the quality control steps of your QXT libraries that have been generated, Agilent suggests utilizing either the 2100 bioanalyzer or the Agilent 2200 tape station for this step of the protocol. In your protocol, you'll see different examples of fragmentation profiles that can be obtained when you navigate the QXT workflow, whether you're performing whole genome, library prep generation, or library prep generation for target enrichment. If you have any concerns about the fragmentation profiles that you may obtain when navigating this workflow, we encourage you to send those traces to our technical support team to make sure that you're confident and comfortable with those samples that you generated prior to moving forward. Now I'd like to briefly highlight the key points that will help ensure you achieve optimal performance when running the QXT library prep workflow. The first is to ensure that high-quality genomic DNA is used. You want to avoid using partially or completely degraded genomic DNA, as this can impact the overall fragmentation profile and performance of the workflow. Secondly, is to take the necessary steps required to accurately measure the amount of genomic DNA going into the fragmentation workflow. To do this, we suggest running multiple serial dilutions and to measure those dilutions using an instrument such as the Qubit or pico-green assay rather than the nanodrop to ensure accurate measurements are achieved. Thirdly, is to make sure that the reagents that you obtain in your kit are thoroughly mixed and properly stored prior and during use. These reagents are viscous and can potentially impact pipetting accuracy, so taking the extra steps required to ensure that you're pipetting the right amount of enzyme and buffer and sample will again help ensure ideal fragmentation profiles are achieved. In addition to these, you also want to make sure that you're accurately measuring your time and temperature control during the incubation procedures within this workflow, as going too long or allowing the samples to incubate for too short of a time can impact the overall fragmentation profile of the samples. Lastly, at the completion of the QXT library prep workflow, you'll be performing a quality control step. In the protocol, we have examples of what ideal library profiles may look like at the completion of the workflow. However, if you have questions or are not sure about the quality of your own library prep traces, we encourage you to send those traces to our technical support team, and they can help provide you with the necessary information to give you confidence to move forward with the overall workflow. This video tutorial describes how to set up and run an analysis to find copy number variations in your sample. See the video tutorial running an analysis for general information on the analysis process. From the analysis workflow screen, select the pair analysis method to determine copy number changes in a sample. Next, import the sample files. You will need to use a reference sample that does not have a copy number change in your region of interest. Once you have imported your sample files, choose the default copy number analysis method from the analysis method dropdown. Next, specify which Haloplex or SureSelect design was used to generate the data. Lastly, select the appropriate platform from the platform dropdown. Click OK to return to the import sample screen. From here, you can change the design, platform, or analysis method, but both sample and reference must have the same selections for each. Click Next to continue to the rest of the analysis workflow. The final steps of the workflow are covered in more detail in the Running an Analysis Workflow video tutorial. Once you have started the analysis, you will see your samples listed on the sample review screen. When the analysis is completed, select it on the sample review screen and click Triage View to see the results. In the mutation table, instead of one set of results, there will be 3 tabs: mutation data for both sample and reference file analysis, and a third table showing the CNV results. The CNV results tab displays all instances of copy number variation, along with the type of aberration. Shown here is a gain or increase in copy number, as well as the read depth, log ratio, and score the SureCall calculated during the analysis. See the help documentation provided with SureCall for more detailed information. What I'm going to be doing is taking you through the restriction enzyme digest step of our Haloplex target enrichment protocol. So what I have here in my ice block is I've prepared genomic DNA samples. I have 12 tubes, but I have 11 genomic DNA samples I'm interested in processing. And then the final tube in this row consists of a control sample, which is included in the Haloplex kit that's used to perform the quality control of the restriction enzyme digest I'm about to prepare. Below, I have a green strip and a red strip. Each of these 2 strips contain 8 unique enzymes. So there are 8 enzymes that are unique to green and 8 enzymes that are unique to red. You want to make sure that you correctly orient the red strip and the green strip such that they're both either at the top or the bottom of your plate when you're mixing your enzymes together. Along those lines, I have another strip tube here that's my restriction enzyme master mix, and that's clearly labeled with a black mark at the top to again help maintain that orientation, because I'm going to combine together the enzymes from the green strip into the restriction enzyme master mix. And then what I'll do is I'll mix well by pipetting 5 to 7 times. Okay, so now the green strip is done. You can either move it aside or you can keep it there, whatever you find is easiest, just as long as you know that you've actually used the enzymes from that. And then secondly, I'll go into the red strip, again maintaining my orientation, such that the red, the green, and my black mark all line up properly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to aliquot my restriction enzyme master mix that I've made that has 8 unique restriction enzyme digests in each tube, consisting of the enzymes from the green strip and the enzymes from the red strip. So I'll move this over here. I'll make room for my 96-well plate. again, to maintain the proper orientation for the Halo Flex digestion, you want to, again, make sure that the upper left corner of your plate, A1, is matched up with the black mark you have in your restriction enzyme master mix. Because what we're about to do is I'm going to be aliquoting this master mix column-wise across the plate. Again, making sure my orientation is maintained when I transfer. So now what I've done is I have my entire plate filled column-wise with my restriction enzymes and the buffer and the BSA. And the next thing that I'm now going to do is I'm now going to transfer my genomic DNA and my control samples row-wise down across the plate, such that each column represents one genomic DNA sample, and then my control will be along the final row of my 96 well plate. Now, as you do this, you want to make sure that you change your tips in between each aliquoting of your genomic DNA into your 96 well plate that's going to be used for the digest, because each row is a unique double digest. I'll mix the sample thoroughly, 5-7 times. So now I've completed the aliquoting of my genomic DNA row-wise across the plate. My restriction enzyme double digests are present column-wise from left to right across the plate. And what this will now allow you to do is to ensure that you have the right pair of enzymes and that each pair of enzymes is being digesting the genomic sample across this entire 96 well plate. Before doing any ampere purification, the first and foremost thing to do is to pull out your ampere beads and allow them to come to room temperature for at least 30 minutes before use. After that point, vigorously vortex the beads, and then if you'd like, you can pour them into a reservoir like I have, or into an individual tube. So the first thing that we need to do, which is a unique aspect of this particular ampere purification, is we're actually going to be diluting the ampere beads that we're going to be using with water. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be transferring 40 microliters of water into fresh tubes. I'm processing 12 samples here. Once the water has been transferred, I'll then go back in, adjust my pipette, and pipette 100 microliters of the ampere beads with the water to dilute them, and then mix very thoroughly by pipetting up and down.